This is the story of a woman who lost everything. A widow, a foreigner, an outsider. Yet her name became part of history. And before this story ends, you will understand why holding on in your hardest season can change everything. The story takes place during the time of the Judges, around 1200 to 1100 BCE. This was one of the darkest periods in Israel's history. The Bible describes it with one powerful sentence. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. Judges 21:25. There was no king, no centralized government. Tribes often fought each other. Foreign nations oppressed Israel. Spiritually, the people drifted in and out of obedience to God. At this same time, in a neighboring land east of the Dead Sea, there was a nation called Moab. The Moabites descended from Lot, Abraham's nephew. Though related to Israel, the relationship between Moab and Israel was strained. In fact, during Israel's wilderness journey, Moab had opposed them, Numbers 22 through 25. So culturally and historically, Moabites and Israelites did not mix easily. It is in this setting that famine struck Bethlehem in Judah. Yes, Bethlehem, the same Bethlehem that would later become famous centuries afterward. The name Bethlehem means house of bread. Yet there was no bread. A man named Elimelech left Bethlehem with his wife Naomi and their two sons, Mahlon and Chilion. They moved to Moab to survive the famine. Leaving the Promised Land during famine was not uncommon, but it was spiritually significant. It symbolized desperation. In Moab, tragedy unfolded. Elimelech died. His two sons married Moabite women, Orpah and Ruth. Then both sons died. In ancient Near Eastern culture, this was devastating. Women depended on male relatives for economic protection. Widows without sons were among the most vulnerable people in society. Naomi had lost her husband and both sons. Ruth had lost her husband. No children, no inheritance, no protection. Historically, widows were often reduced to poverty unless a kinsman-redeemer stepped in, a close male relative who could marry the widow and preserve the family line. Deuteronomy 25:5-6. But Ruth was not even an Israelite. She was a Moabite, an outsider. When Naomi heard that food had returned to Bethlehem, she decided to go home. She urged her daughters-in-law to remain in Moab. Orpah wept and left. But Ruth did something radical. She spoke words that echo through history.
Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God my God.
This was more than loyalty to Naomi. This was conversion. This was covenant commitment. This was faith. Ruth was leaving her gods, her land, her culture, and her security to follow the God of Israel. Historically, this was bold. Moabite women were not automatically welcomed into Israelite society. In fact, Deuteronomy 23:3 speaks about restrictions concerning Moabites entering the assembly of the Lord. Yet Ruth chose faith over fear. When they arrived in Bethlehem, the town whispered. Naomi said, "Do not call me Naomi, pleasant. Call me Mara, bitter, because the Almighty has dealt bitterly with me." Ruth 1:20. The bitterness was real, but Ruth did not sit in despair. She went to glean in the fields. Now here is a powerful historical detail. Under Israelite law, Leviticus 19:9-10, landowners were commanded not to harvest the edges of their fields so that the poor and widows could gather leftover grain. This was God's built-in social welfare system. Ruth entered a field belonging to a man named Boaz. Boaz was not random. He was a relative of Elimelech, making him a potential kinsman-redeemer. Boaz was a wealthy landowner, described as a man of standing. During the time of Judges, when moral chaos dominated, Boaz stands out as righteous, kind, and God-fearing. He noticed Ruth's hard work. He heard about her loyalty to Naomi, and he spoke blessing over her.
May the Lord bless you, Ruth.
Thank you, my lord.
You have found favor.
In a society where foreigners were often marginalized, Boaz showed covenant kindness, what the Hebrew calls hesed, steadfast love. Through Naomi's guidance, Ruth approached Boaz according to the cultural practice of redemption.
Ruth, my daughter, prepare your heart. This covenant demands faith and resolve. Trust in the Lord's guidance.
Boaz agreed, but there was a closer relative first in line. At the city gate, the ancient court system where elders made legal decisions, Boaz presented the matter publicly. The closer relative declined. Boaz redeemed the land and married Ruth. This was not just romance. This was legal restoration. This was covenant fulfillment. This was God's providence at work through ordinary obedience. Ruth, the foreign widow, gave birth to a son named Obed. Obed became the father of Jesse. Jesse became the father of King David. And centuries later, from David's lineage would come Jesus Christ. A Moabite widow became part of the Messianic line. History shifted because one woman refused to give up. Ruth's life teaches something profound. Your background does not disqualify you. Your losses do not define you. Your season of famine does not cancel your destiny. She walked through grief. She walked through rejection. She walked through uncertainty. But she held on. She held on to Naomi. She held on to covenant. She held on to God. And when you hold on to God, He weaves your pain into purpose. Ruth did not know she was stepping into history. She just chose faithfulness in the present moment, and that changed everything. Maybe you feel like Ruth, unseen, uncertain, rebuilding from loss. Maybe you feel like Naomi, bitter, questioning, tired. Hear this clearly. God is still working in famine seasons. God is still moving in foreign lands. God is still writing redemption into your story. If a widowed foreigner in a dark historical period could become part of the greatest royal lineage in biblical history, then your story is not over. Your obedience today may shape generations tomorrow. If this story stirred something in you, don't scroll past it. Pause, reflect, and make a decision. Choose faith over fear. Choose obedience over bitterness. Choose trust over despair. Comment, I choose to trust God. Share this with someone who feels forgotten. Save it for the day you feel like giving up. Because sometimes all it takes to change history is one person who refuses to quit.